Hello and bonjour, I'm Sarah Bokhari and you're watching Power Dilemmas here at TAG TV. Doug Ford said he is truly humbled by the trust voters have placed in him as he and his cabinet took their oaths of office at Queen's Park, ushering in the province's first progressive conservative government in nearly 15 years. A bagpiper led Ford and the 21-member strong cabinet into the Ontario legislature. Ford becomes Ontario's 26th premier following his party's majority win in June. The formal ceremony was presided over by Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdeswell. To voters, Ford retreated his campaign pledges to respect taxpayers' money, eliminate the cap and trade system, lower gas prices, start a full audit of government spending, and to represent your interests above all others, to make decisions that will make life easier, better, and more affordable, decisions that will alter the course of our great province and impact the future of our children, he said. It is the first transition of power between parties in Ontario in nearly 15 years, since the PC government of Ernie Eves made way for the Liberal government of Dalton McGuinty on October 23, 2003. Other campaign promises Ford and his cabinet could move on quickly include launching an independent audit of provincial finances left behind by the outgoing Liberal government, reviewing Ontario's sex education curriculum, and ousting the board of directors of Hydro One. The Ford transition team has already ordered an indefinite hiring freeze among provincial government ministries. Ford announced the legislature will resume on July 11th when MPPs will elect a speaker who will take on the job of keeping MPPs in line. The NDP will also form the official opposition under leader Andrea Horwath with 40 seats. The Liberals hold just 7 seats, too few for official party status in legislature. Green Party leader Mike Schreiner won his party's first ever seat in Ontario in Guelph. We have Jamie Lurton of Conaptus to talk about the new progressive conservative government in Ontario. Welcome to my show, Jamie.
Thanks for having me back, Sarah.
Okay, it's so good to have you always. So, Jamie, what do you think of Premier Doug Ford's new cabinet?
I think this is definitely keeping in tone with his mandate for change in Ontario. I think with this choice of his cabinet ministries really showed he's leaning on people who have experience not only in the legislature but also in business, in the community, and other levels of government to make sure that there's a team in place that can actually get things done. It's one thing for the Premier and for the party to have a platform, but now they need to work with the public service to implement all of these. So they're going to be getting briefed up on what's in their ministry. They're going to be looking at areas where they can reduce costs and find those savings and efficiencies that Doug Ford's been talking about, and ultimately get to work in delivering the change that Ontarians voted for.
What do you think of his choice for the Deputy Premier, Christine Elliott?
I think Christine Elliott's a great choice for Deputy Premier. She was also previously, when sitting in the caucus as an opposition MPP, was the deputy leader under Tim Hudak. Christine has a very extensive career in both public service as well as in the private sector, and is most recently serving as patient ombudsman for the healthcare system. She's going to already have a head start at knowing where some of the reforms that need to take place to make sure that people who go to their doctors aren't waiting too long, and the issues that are kind of more systemic kind of get addressed. So I think that's a great choice, and I think it also speaks to the role and how widely respected Christine is across the political spectrum and within the Conservative Party, or the Progressive Conservative Party. So it's going to be a strong voice at the table. And if you look at how Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs ran the campaign, yes, this was about Doug Ford and for the people, but he also really showed that he had a team of people who could get the job done and hit the ground running on day one. And I think he's demonstrated that's indeed true with this appointment.
What do you think about Ms. Mulroney being the Attorney General? Is she, because a lot of people say she's not experienced.
She may be new to politics, but she's also got extensive career in the legal field as well as in investment stuff. and she's proven herself a hard worker already in her new forte into politics. She's also fluently bilingual and the minister responsible for Francophone affairs. So indeed, this is going to be a growth position for her, and if I'm Minister Mulroney, I'm probably going to have a bit of a healthy chip on my shoulder, and I'm going to look to prove the doubters that she has what it takes. I have no doubt she's going to study her briefing books hard and get up to speed and kind of get out across the province to really get into the details of what the issues are so that she can help navigate that. There's going to be a lot of issues, of course, with the Attorney General, which touches on justice and community safety, and I think she's a great woman for the job.
I always believe, and I believe a lot of people believe, that it should be the best person for the job. There's a lot of criticism from the other side that the cabinet is not diverse enough. What is your sense of it?
After 15 years of Liberal government, if that's all they have to work with, I think that's kind of really a shame. I think there is a very diverse caucus and a very large caucus to go from, and that's not just ethnocultural diversity, that's also gender diversity and generational diversity, with over 13 millennials in that caucus, some of which have been tapped as parliamentary assistants in the upcoming session, and which is kind of like a road to future ministers. So if you look at the diversity of the Ontario PC party and how that reflects the modern face of Ontario, after 15 years of Liberal government with a need for a lot of change and the need to clean up the mess and get the fiscal house and everything else back in order, that doesn't just start with the Ministry of Finance saying, here's the money you have to spend. It really goes down to changing the culture of government and looking to have how the departments operate and how grant recipients operate to get the picture and kind of transform that change throughout. And so on the issue of diversity, the Ontario Public Service is very diverse. Diversity is a real issue. Of course, it's always great when you kind of see that reflected, but with the experience that they were looking for that mattered in the form of a cabinet and having had that legislative experience, the new blood that came in that kind of would fall into that more diverse lens will get their chance, and they need to prove themselves as MPPs.
Okay, so Premier Doug Ford wants the legislature to start working July the 11th as soon as they get a speaker. First of all, what are a few names which are good for speaker, and why shouldn't the newly elected MPPs and the ministers take a break in summer? Why do they have to start work in July the 11th? What does it tell about Premier Doug Ford's work ethic?
I think what it says is the government is very keen to get to work. There's only so much that the ministries and the executive level of government can do, but a lot of what happens in government needs to be approved by Parliament. That's why we elect members of provincial Parliament to represent us from our constituencies in the legislature and to hold the government to account. And so I think it's important that then it's clearly a priority from Premier Ford that he wants to get right to work after 15 years of a Liberal rule and spending and debt and all of that getting out of control. He wants to bring the legislature back to get the mandate through the legislature. Whether that's going to be a budget, I don't know. That's probably too soon to say. But if you look at what it relates to on hydro bills and some of the affordability stuff, and even taking the gas tax on lowering that 10 cents, as he has so promised, as well as the 12% on hydros, he's going to need the legislative mechanisms to get that through. And I think signaling a rare summer session just shows how serious Premier Ford is in implementing the agenda and getting straight to work.
Let's talk about the Speaker of the House. Who do you think are a few good names? Rick Nichols just announced that he would like to run for the Speaker. Who are the other good names?
Yeah, so if you look at how a speaker is elected, it's actually the only it's the only vote that members will cast that's actually done by secret ballot. Normally when members of provincial parliament vote, as they do in the House of Commons, they stand up and it's publicly recorded. The election of the speaker is done by secret ballot. And so you kind of have to look at who would have the broad respective caucus and all of the legislature for that matter, not just their own party, but with the majority of MPPs and a rather sizable amount of them being progressive conservative MPs, I think it's a pretty safe bet to assume the speaker will come from the government caucus. I think you'd look for people who have been in the legislature for some time, who have experience, who understand the procedural aspects of how these things rule, but also have the respect of their fellow members as an arbitrator of independent thought. And so I think one of the names to watch for in this regard would probably be Randy Hillier.
Oh, okay. Okay. So there are quite a few names in line to be the speaker.
Yeah, there would definitely be anyone could put their name forward for speaker, so long as they're essentially not a minister, is my understanding of the rules. But and they kind of keep going until they have the support of a majority of members to lead them as speaker in the House. But we'll see when that comes. It'll be the first order of business after the legislature resumes.
So moving forward, what are the the most important things Premier Ford is going to tackle with?
I think first and foremost, it's the debt and the deficit. Ontario is now the largest sub-sovereign indebted territory in the world. So what does that mean? Anything that's a government that's not a country, so as states and other provinces elsewhere in the world, Ontario is the most indebted, and that's a huge problem. We already spend more on interest payments just to pay the interest for the debt than we do on universities, colleges, and training, and that's just ultimately not sustainable in the long term. So Doug Ford's going to need to put forward a plan that, yes, offers the relief and being seen to do so in a visible way here out of the gate, but in the short to medium term, actually bring the Ontario government's budget back to balance and start to pay down that debt, because every dollar they borrow, there's interest payments that go with that, and that ultimately diverts very much needed funding, whether that be tax relief, healthcare, or education. Okay, wonderful to talk to you, Jamie Lurton, always. We will talk to you next week. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for having me. Okay, folks, so this was Mr. Jamie Lurton from Conaptus, and we at Power Dilemma at TAG TV wish Premier Doug Ford all the best. With this, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we have Mr. Patrick Brown as our speaker, as our panelist, and he's going to talk about what are his future plans. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Power Dilemma here at TAG TV. Patrick Brown is attempting a political comeback less than 6 months after he was forced to step down as leader of Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party. Mr. Brown officially entered the race to become chair of the region of Peel, writes the Globe and Mail. Mr. Brown, who many observers had expected would become Ontario's next premier, instead resigned as PC leader in January amid allegations of sexual misconduct broadcasted by CTV. Mr. Brown has denied the allegations and launched a lawsuit against the network. CTV News says it stands by its reporting. Mr. Brown opted not to run in the recent provincial election after he was barred from running as a PC candidate in March, and instead, Mr. Brown recently announced to run as regional chair for Peel. The post was previously appointed by the region's councillors. For the first time this year, however, residents will be voting directly for the chair in the municipal election, which is scheduled for October 22nd. The former PC leader is writing a book about his ouster titled Take Down: The Political Assassination of Patrick Brown. Mr. Brown said he is now hoping to publish this book in November. So to talk about Mr. Brown's comeback in politics, his books, and his community engagement, we have the man himself in our Power Dilemma at TAG TV. Welcome to my show, Patrick.
Well, Sarah, great to be back on your show. If I recall, I was on the show just a few years ago.
You were. Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you. So, Patrick, the Globe and Mail heading came up. Former Ontario PC leader Patrick Brown enters race for Peel Region Chair. So why Patrick Brown wants to run? Why in politics? Because public service could be done in other sectors as well.
So, like you, Sarah, I love public service. I love helping people. I love helping families. And you're right, there's different ways to opt for public service. You know, my grandmother was a volunteer at the hospital for over 50 years, and that was her public service. My fiance works at Sick Kids Foundation. She loves nothing more than working for sick kids. The way I've loved to help people is through the political process, where you can better families' lives by making life a little bit easier. And frankly, there are challenges facing Peel that I want to hit dead on. You look at the rising rates of crime, that needs to be addressed. The gridlock, the suffocating gridlock that plagues Peel needs to be addressed, and frankly, we need to do a better job at recruiting jobs and investment to Peel. Too many people living in Mississauga and Brampton have to leave to get work. I'd also say You know, when I was opposition leader, Sarah, I toured every hospital in the province, and the underfunding and the overcrowding in Peel is amongst the worst in the province. And I've heard story after story of families, when they need to go to a hospital, rather than being stuck in a hallway in Peel, they go to another city. They'll drive to Oakville to the hospital, and that's not good enough. I want to be an advocate for Peel, that we deserve a fair deal. We need to make sure that we have roads that can move cars quickly, that we don't have the suffocating gridlock. We need to recruit jobs and investment in industry to Peel, and we need to make sure that we have a strong, united voice to senior levels of government, that our healthcare apparatus needs to be properly funded.
Okay, so you said in a recent Globe News 640 Toronto talk show recently, and I quote, "I started out in municipal politics, which is non-partisan setting. So it's going to be good to be back to that." So my question is, why municipal politics? And our viewers would like to make sense of this non-partisan.
So in provincial and federal politics, you have political parties that comprise the legislature. In the municipal level, you don't have political parties. There's not the blue team or the red team or the orange team or the green team. It's about ideas and people. And frankly, you know, I'm looking forward to that. You know, my favorite premier was Bill Davis. I thought he was one of Ontario's finest public servants. And I always really admired him because he was collegial, collaborative. He wasn't overly partisan. And one of my frustrations with provincial and federal politics is that it is so partisan. Everything the Conservatives do, the Liberals dislike. Everything the Liberals do, the Conservatives dislike. And I've always said in politics, and it shouldn't matter the color of the idea that was put forward. It shouldn't matter if it's a blue bill or a red bill. If it makes sense for Ontario, if it makes sense for Canada, we should support it. I've always said, and Sarah, you've heard me say this many times, there's no monopoly on a good idea. What counts is, does it help people? And that's difficult to break through in the world of partisan politics, because it's so much of my team, your team. What I love about municipal politics is that there's only one team, and that's helping people.
Okay, so it's kind of safe being nonpartisan and going municipal?
Well, municipal is nonpartisan, so there's not political parties at the municipal level, and frankly, that's refreshing.
Okay, so in one of the other interviews you said, and I quote, "I still love public service, I love helping people, I love bettering our community. They say adversity makes you stronger, and I'm up for the task of dealing with the challenges that face Peel region." What do you mean by adversity?
So adversity means when you face personal
in this very context.
Difficulty, yeah. And so obviously what I had to go through earlier this year was tough. Tough on myself, tough on my family, but you can't look backwards. You just have to use that as strength. And you know, that adversity, I think, is you know, it knocked me down, but I got back up, and that's what counts. And frankly, that's what the people of Peel, I think, want in a chair: tenacity, a determination. We got big challenges that we have to address head on, and we're going to need determination to reduce the level of crime. We're going to need determination to deal with the gridlock. We're going to need determination to recruit good-paying jobs to Peel. We're going to need determination to deal with the social housing crisis, where the wait times are 6 to 8 years. And I hope to take that determination and that work ethic and that tenacity to take on these challenges.
So I'm going to ask you, you know, up close. It's an up close personal interview with you. The coming question is, you know, personal. And Patrick, do you think that the entire work for winning the 2018 election by the Progressive Conservative Party was done by you, and the credit was given to someone else?
Listen, I think there's many people that are responsible for the success of the party on June 7th. You know, I felt like I ran 41 kilometers of a marathon and someone else finished the last kilometer, but I didn't do it alone. You know, we hosted fundraiser after fundraiser to get rid of the party debt. We recruited great candidate after great candidate, and we built a great team. And so, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who gets credit. The issue is, do we help people in Ontario? I made some pretty big commitments when I was PC leader. You look at the promise I made to fund mental health, $1.9 billion a year towards mental health. That's the dirty little secret in Ontario's healthcare system. and I hope that it's honored. I hope that the government, which has said they'll make that investment, that they do. If we make life easier for families, if we deal with the overcrowding in the Peel hospitals, if we deal with gridlock, then that will be the vindication that I'm looking for, that we've actually changed Ontario for the better.
So, one more very personal question. Patrick, do you feel that you're a fractured, injured politician, and now you're reviving back and you've survived it?
Listen, there's obviously people that tried to hurt me, have a few knife wounds in my back, but you know, I don't bear grudges. I don't hold any resentment. I look forward, and I'm just excited about being able to continue to contribute. I never get involved in sort of the inside games and maneuverings. I'm just focused on making life easier for the people of Peel.
Okay, so moving forward to your run-in for the municipality of Peel. The chair of Peel is the CEO of the municipality and acts as the head of the regional council for the cities of Mississauga and Brampton and the town of Caledon. What more are you bringing to this position?
Well, I think I bring experience. I've been elected at all three levels of government. I understand that there is only one taxpayer, and there's no point of pointing fingers. We just need to get the job done for the people of Peel. I also bring, frankly, an array of contacts and relationships, and when I go out there and pitch investment in Peel, I think some of those contacts and relationships I've built are going to come in handy.
Okay, so there are 6 other candidates who are currently signed up for the position, including Mississauga Councillor Ron Starr. How would you deal with this competition right after you were made to leave the leadership of Ontario's biggest party?
Well, I would say more the merrier. That's the beautiful thing about democracy. And if there's 6 candidates running, or 7 or 14, it's good when people participate. And so I hope the other candidates enjoy the experience, that meet as many people as possible, and knock on a lot of doors. That's the best way to, talk to electors.
Tell us a little bit about your book, what it is comprised of, and who should read your book.
So anyone who's interested
in
purchasing my book, you can purchase it on Amazon. We haven't settled on the final title, but you look Patrick Brown, you'll see the book is up there. Frankly, I tell my story. I took a lot of controversial positions when I was the PC leader. I was the only Conservative in the country at the time to speak passionately about climate change and wanting to do our part. I was the only Conservative leader to support the motion condemning Islamophobia. Some of the opposition I got, Sarah, you remember at the time, there were a lot of people that was criticizing me, but I said it was the right thing to do. I don't care if you're of Hindu background, of Muslim background, of Catholic background, of Jewish background. Hate against anyone is just wrong. And I gave that speech in the legislature, and I talk about that. I talk about how I was building a modern, inclusive Conservative party. I always said, it doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter where you're born. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter what God you worship. Everyone has a home in the modern, inclusive PC party. Everyone has a home in Ontario and in Canada. And we changed the party during that time. It wasn't your typical country club, all-white, old PC party. It became one that was diverse and reflected the mosaic of the province. And so I am proud of that inclusive approach that we took.
So we have a few more questions with Patrick Brown. After a short break, we are going to have Professor Nelson Weisman from University of Toronto, and then we are going to have a little debate. Maybe Professor has a few questions to Mr. Patrick Brown. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Power Dilemmas at TAG TV. We have Patrick Brown in our studios, and we are continuing with the interview. And in this segment, we also have Professor Nelson Weisman from University of Toronto. Welcome to my show, Professor.
Thank you.
And Professor, we also have Patrick Brown in the studios.
Very good.
Okay, so my question to you, Patrick, is Premier Doug Ford just announced a good cabinet, but it has been criticized for not being diverse. Patrick, first I'll take your comments, and then I will take Professor's comments.
Well,
Do you think it's diverse?
First of all, I don't want to be a backseat driver, and Premier Ford is entitled to pick the cabinet that he believes in. I would say this, though. I went to great lengths to recruit a slate of candidates that were diverse, that represented the mosaic of Ontario, and I think there are some very capable individuals who aren't in cabinet. I look at Prab Sakaria from Brampton, a successful, brilliant lawyer who of Sikh faith that could very well serve a senior cabinet role. I look at Nina Tangri with an impressive background who, I think it was surprising that she didn't make the cabinet. You look at Khalid Rashid, who was a senior executive at BlackBerry. He could, of Muslim faith and background from Pakistan, he could easily have been a cabinet minister. And so I think there are some missed opportunities of people that could serve in cabinet. Amarjot Sandhu, I remember from Brampton West, encouraging him to run. He was an international student. What a role model that he's now an MPP, a real hard worker, a real go-getter. And so I think there are certainly people who are qualified of different faiths and colors and diversity that could be in cabinet, and I hope that in the coming months and years that they will be given that opportunity, and I think the Premier would not be let down. I think these are some pretty great representatives, and I hope they're given a chance.
Okay, what do you think, Professor, on the cabinet made by Premier Doug Ford?
Well, I'm not completely surprised. I mean, I think the cabinet reflects a number of things. First off, we've got to remember that it's much smaller than the last cabinet, although I'm confident it'll expand. That usually happens. It's been shrunk from 29 to 21. There has been a lot of commentary about racial diversity in the cabinet. It did pop up, but I'm not really surprised. A lot of the people have been serving in opposition as shadow ministers, and I think there would have been problems for the Premier had he not put in those people into the cabinet. So you're always going to have this struggle between how many people you can put in and who it is you put in. But I'm curious, if I might ask Patrick, why he didn't run, because he was greenlit to be a candidate. You were greenlit to be a candidate by the party, and then you decided not to run, and that was always curious to me.
Okay, there's a question for you, Patrick, from Professor Nelson Weisman. Why didn't you run?
Well, I have some differences of perspectives with Premier Ford on some issues. I'm more of a Bill Davis conservative. I believe in that modern, inclusive, pragmatic conservatism. Having said that, I think Mr. Ford has a great team, an impressive slate of candidates, and I hope that they exceed expectations. I hope that they serve Ontario with distinction. We got to get this province back on track. We can't settle for a have-not province, and I'm not going to be part of that team at Queen's Park, but I am going to throw all my energy and heart into running for the chair of Peel Region, to looking at helping the people in Mississauga, Brampton and Caledon, and I'm looking forward to that challenge.
Well, can I just ask another question?
Yes, please
then?
go ahead, Professor.
Are you trying to take Sarah's job?
No.
I said, are you trying to take Sarah's job as the as the top interviewer?
I invited Professor Nelson Weisman to ask a few questions to Mr. Patrick Brown. I invited him.
I'm only teasing you, sir. I know he's not. He's a great political science professor. Yeah. He was actually my political science professor at the University of Toronto. So I know he's not trying to take your job.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, I'm curious because I saw your comment in today's paper that you're looking forward to participating in a nonpartisan forum again, and you mentioned you're running for the chair out in Peel. So are you no longer active in the Conservative Party? Have you had any contact with the Premier? I assume you're still a member of the party.
So I have many good friends who are members of the Premier's cabinet. Frankly, I went to great lengths to recruit Carolyn Maroney to run, Rod Phillips, Peter Bethlen-Falvey. Some of the stars of the new cabinet are people that I personally expended a lot of time and capital to convince them to take the leap of faith to enter provincial politics. And of course, I've stayed in touch with them. I consider them all friends. I haven't spoken to the premier, but I've spoken to certainly a number of the members of his administration and his team. What I say about municipal politics being nonpartisan is that there's no parties, and frankly, in municipal politics, we have to work with every party, and so whether it's looking for funding for Peel from the Trudeau Liberals in Ottawa or the Ford Conservatives in Queen's Park, I think you need to check your partisan allegiances at the door. And frankly, I'm looking forward to that in the sense that I was always, when I say I'm a Bill Davis conservative, what I mean by that is he was always, you know, collaborative, collegial. He wasn't overly partisan. One of my favorite quotes that I used to say in the legislature all the time is there's no monopoly on a good idea. It shouldn't matter if a good idea comes from the Liberals, from the New Democrats, or the Conservatives. If it makes sense for Ontario, if it makes sense for Canada, we should support it. And one of my criticisms of partisan politics is that there's a tendency that it's the blue team or the red team or the orange team or the green team, and there's this adversarial approach even to good ideas. And one of the nice parts of municipal politics is you lose a great element of that adversarial approach, and there's more scrutiny on the merits of an individual idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have a question about, again, going back to the diversity of the region where you're running. Peel region is very diverse, and I believe the most prominent, correct me if I'm wrong, the most prominent demographics are the Muslim communities. How is that true?
Well, I think the largest communities would probably be South Asian.
South Asian
Muslims.
The
Indo-Canadian community, particularly of Sikh faith, has a large component of Peel region. But you're right, there is also, not as large, but there is a large Muslim community in Peel region as well.
How well you are positioned to deal with their problems and the issues of that very community, and how are you going to engage with that community?
Well, I certainly feel very grateful for the support we've been getting from the Muslim community. A number of the imams have already told me that they remember I was the only conservative leader in the country that supported the motion condemning Islamophobia. They're not going to forget that I was a friend. And frankly, there's been high-profile people in the community who have already publicly endorsed me. I look at Waqas Gondal from the Urdu Times. There are a lot of friends in the community, Badar from the Brampton Board of Trade, who have said, we want to actively campaign for Patrick, and I'm humbled by their faith and their support.
And was that the reason you you changed from Barrie to Mississauga and you started living in Mississauga, because this is the community you resonate with?
Well, regardless of the different faiths and the diversity of Peel, before I was a member of Parliament, I practiced law in Brampton. My father's been practicing law in Brampton for 40 years, and my fiancée, Genevieve, is born and raised in Lorne Park in South Mississauga. Her uncle is the new MPP there, Rudy Cazzetto. Her family's been there for 4 generations, and so we've been living in Mississauga now, and felt this was an area that we could certainly contribute.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to congratulate you on getting engaged to a very beautiful, beautiful lady.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay, so Professor, do you have any other question to ask Mr. Patrick Brown?
Well, Patrick raised the issue that we should take good ideas from wherever they come from. That's going to be his attitude if and when he gets elected on Peel Council. So I'm thinking about, Patrick worked a lot on a platform last year. I don't know, I think it was maybe over 80 pages. It was very impressive and flashy, got a lot of attention, and one of its centerpieces was to have a carbon tax. And what we've been hearing from the Premier is he's assaulting both the cap-and-trade program that Ontario's been in, and he calls it a form of carbon tax, and he's opposed to having a carbon tax. So I'm wondering if he can, what he thinks of this. Is he critical of the new government on this point?
So I've always believed that Conservatives should not be fearful to talk about the environment. I think sometimes we've avoided debates on the environment. Let's not forget that it was Bill Davis that created the Ministry of the Environment. It was Brian Rooney that negotiated the Acid Rain Treaty, and I think there is a tradition of Conservatives caring about the environment. And frankly, I think Canadians expect Conservatives to put forward credible programs when it comes to dealing with climate change and doing our part. I agree with Mr. Ford that cap and trade is a flawed mechanism to deal with climate change. It was in my platform to dismantle cap and trade and simply accept the federal carbon price. Justin Trudeau has said that there's going to be a carbon price on every province, and it's up to the provinces just to decide where that revenue goes. So you can set up your own system, or you can accept the federal system. I wasn't proposing we set up our own system. I was saying that we would return any funds collected by the federal carbon price and return it to the people in broad-based tax relief. And so obviously Mr. Ford has chosen to fight that federal carbon price in the courts. What I would predict is, I think if you talk to a political science professor, they'll probably tell you that under the Constitution that the federal government does have this right, that I don't think the legal case is going to be successful, that we have a division of powers that allows that, but time will tell if the courts agree with that interpretation.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, anything, we always give a chance to our politicians to deliver a message to the viewers. Do you have any message to our viewers, Patrick?
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask Nelson Wiseman if he agrees with that perspective that the court will uphold the federal government's right to impose a carbon price.
Yes, under Section 91, subsection 3, which gives the federal government access to any mode or system of taxation. And similarly, that's how we got the GST, despite protestations by every single province. But
you see, I was paying attention in your class.
Yeah. You talk about the money going back to, if I can just focus on the issue of the feds imposing a carbon tax. I think they will, and I think they'll be successful in the courts. And they proposed giving the money back to the provinces, and you suggested you could provide broad-based tax relief, which is one possibility that could be done. And I think BC acted that way when they introduced a tax initially, although now they're using the money for other things as well. But it seemed to me that if we are talking about former Conservative premiers, I thought one of the tax that Premier Mike Harris used that was very, very effective is in the middle of his term, I remember getting a check for $100. And I think one of the dangers to the Conservatives here in the province is that the federal government might very well harvest the money from the tax that it's imposing, and rather than turning it over to the provincial government, send checks to individuals in the province, which will bring a lot of credit to the federal government and not so much to the province.
Yeah, and ultimately, Doug Ford will have to make that choice to allow the funds to stay with the federal government or to give it back to the people and choose how to use it as he deems appropriate. The proposal I put forward in the People's Guarantee, which was my platform, was that the federal funds that would be accrued from the federal carbon price, if given to Ontario, and that's what Justin Trudeau said he would do, we would return it in the form of a 22.5% middle-class tax break. And so that was the policy I put forward. Having said that, I am out of provincial politics now. I know sometimes we get bogged down in these issues. My focus now is not debating how I would have done things differently, but focused on how I can make life easier for families in Peel.
So now that you have brought up carbon tax, are you going to push for it once you are a regional chair?
There's no carbon pricing municipally.
Okay.
That's not a regional issue.
Not a regional issue.
It's the federal carbon price was a mandate on the provinces, not on municipalities. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not in your ambit. Okay, so any message to our viewers?
Well, I'd close by saying it's been an honor to be on TAG TV and that I'm eager to work for the community. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for how we can better serve Peel, you can contact us at patrick@servingpeel.com.
Okay, folks, I would like to thank my very worthy guest, Mr. Patrick Brown, in the studio, and our very worthy guest, Professor Nelson Wiseman from University of Toronto on the line. Thank you very much for being on my show. And we talked about very good points from Mr. Patrick Brown, who is running for the regional chair in Peel. Keep watching Power Dilemmas with Sarah Bokhari. Till next week. Ciao.